Warframe is one of the longest running and best known free-to-play games on the market, with tens of thousands of people logging in daily to play. Originally released on PC in March of 2013, Warframe was gradually ported to the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series X and S, and it even got a Nintendo Switch release, with multiple major updates and expansions adding to the gameplay and story over its 11 years. How does Warframe ease new players into the experience? This review is going to answer that question. I checked out Warframe on the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5.
The Tenno. Monuments of an ancient warrior caste. Scattered across frail worlds.
Let's start this review with an overview of what Warframe is. It's a free-to-play game, meaning you can pick it up right now and get started for zero cost. And if you want to, you can do all of its content without paying a dime if you're willing to invest large amounts of your time instead. Warframe is a third-person shooter that sees you fighting off hordes of alien enemies in short missions. If you have ever played Destiny or its sequel Destiny 2, think of the multiplayer strikes and you would be pretty close to the premise. You play as a Tenno, a person who controls a Warframe. Think of an Iron Man suit or a powered exosuit from science fiction, and you have it. These Warframes come in a large variety of types, each with their own set of abilities. Your goal to start with is to travel around the solar system doing missions and jobs for the Lotus, a floating head character that guides you. You essentially start the game with no clue of what's going on, who the enemies are, or why you're killing them. Eventually, after probably 30 to 50 hours depending on your pace, you will reach a point where the story is more developed and you get more background information on your motivations and who are you fighting. But for now, let's save that for the story section. Sticking with just an overview, Warframe is defined by its quick movement, its fast-paced gameplay, its multiplayer accessibility, and its strike-type missions, and mowing down hordes of enemies. It's light on story and heavy on action, with a particular emphasis on the grind. This is a perfect game to play while you're unwinding after a hard day and you just want to zone out. Put on a podcast or TV show on the background and play. Since the story is incredibly light in the beginning, you don't really have to worry about missing out on anything important. If this type of gameplay interests you, I suggest you check out Warframe right now. I mentioned earlier that the story is light in Warframe, and as a new player, that's generally true. There is a lot of content in Warframe, and the developers drip-fed story elements in the early days, only expanding on the lore later in the game. This means that for a lot of new players' experience, you're going to be completely lost on what's happening. You're going to be thrown into battles against enemies where you have no idea why you're fighting, in locations that go largely unexplained, working for people whose motivations are completely lost on you. And that's okay. Warframe is kinda known for not being super accessible for new players, something that even the developers have acknowledged and are actively working on. It can be difficult when you have over a decade of content designed for people who have been with the game for years to have new players come on board. The setting for Warframe is simple to start with and becomes more complicated and expanded as you go through the story missions later in the game. This is a game that's set in the future where Earth and its solar system are a battleground for a bunch of different factions. The Grineer, who are these strange human clones that are all disfigured. The Corpus, who are capitalists taken to the extreme and have advanced technology. And the Infested, who are twisted and deformed versions of the other two races. There are more enemy types, but as a new player, these are the ones you're going to encounter the most. After a cutscene which looks really good, you select a Warframe to use and are set loose into the solar system with only a vague idea of what you're supposed to do. The game has a tutorial, but it's more of a play and figure it out type of game rather than hand-holding and long explanations. You have a Warframe, a ship to travel places, and a few guns to choose from. You follow quest markers across the solar system, opening up more of that map as you do so. Like I said, for the first 30 to 50 hours, things are mostly unexplained and confusing. What is a Tenno? What is a Warframe? Why are you killing the Grineer and the Corpus? What happened to the Earth? Why is the moon missing? And what the hell happened to Phobos, Mars's moon? Again, there are some answers, but they are pretty vague. That is until you reach a point where you enter expansions like the Second Dream and the War Within, which does a lot to explain what's going on. But the problem with the story is, the first large chunk of the game can be boring. You're doing the same mission types, using guns that kind of suck, in the same few maps as you unlock the star map. You're promised by the community that the game and story does get better, you just need to stick it out and get through this part. But this part, quote unquote, is as long as most other games are. This is the point where most new players are going to fall off of Warframe. With its confusing lore, intermittent story beats, and mindless, repetitive missions, there's also the need to figure out the game's mechanics and systems without a real idea of how you're going to do that. Sections of the story are also blocked behind time gates. For example, some missions require you to have certain mastery levels before you can do them. I'll talk about that a little bit more later in the review, but if you're trying to get to the good parts of the story, you're not going to be able to rush through the boring start quickly, since there are huge delays in building better weapons or unlocking later sections of the star map behind these mastery levels. But if you do stick with it, the story does get much better.
Travels fast. Konzu and I haven't spoken in 5 years. Not since his involvement in my husband's disappearance.
Let's dive into the gameplay, since this is what separates Warframe from a lot of its competitors. I'm going to divide this section into chunks, starting with the shooting. The first thing you're going to notice when you start Warframe is how fast you aim on controller. Without touching the aim speed or the thumbstick settings, you look and aim much faster than you would in other shooters. You can spin around, look up and down, or snap to enemies with so much speed that it makes it difficult to hit anything until you get used to it. I believe this is on purpose, and I would suggest you don't change the settings. Just try to adapt to it and get used to it. You're going to want that aim speed since your Warframe moves so quickly that you need to be able to follow up with it. The second thing you're going to notice when you start is how overpowered your guns are. That's on purpose as well. Trust me, that's going to change as the game goes on. Warframe is pretty good at gradually ratcheting up the difficulty, making enemies do more damage and have higher health as the star map opens up. The game has 3 main weapons. Your primary, which are things like rifles and sniper rifles and things like that. They are the typical weapons that you would expect in a shooter. Your secondary weapon is things like pistols or shotguns. These come in a lot of different types as well. Finally, you have your melee weapons. Swords, hammers, polearms. It's been my experience that your strongest weapons are your melee weapons, while it takes a while for the ranged weapons to catch up to it. The guns shoot well with great effects and pretty good accuracy depending on the type you get. You can't customize them with parts, but you can change their colors. Finally, you have the Warframe itself. It comes with a shield bar and a health bar, which can change depending on the type you get. You start off with one of 3 options, but there are dozens to choose from later in the game. They are locked behind a paywall and can be purchased with real money, but you can also buy the blueprint for in-game credits and then just grind out the materials to assemble it. If you do choose the free route, it will take a while to get them, but that's all part of the Warframe grind. You get the blueprint for a weapon or a Warframe, then collect materials in the world or on missions to assemble the individual pieces, then you assemble the Warframe. All the blueprints you pick up in the world or buy with in-game credits are like this, and they all come with a real-world timer to assemble. A Warframe could take 72 hours to build. A gun could take 24 hours. If you do want to put a rush on it, you can use real-world money to boost that progress. We'll talk about microtransactions in its own section, but my experience is Warframe has 2 main commodities, your time and your money. You can reduce one by using the other. If you don't want to spend days grinding levels or materials, you can just use some cash. You don't want to spend cash on a Warframe? It'll take some of your time to grind it out and a few days assembling it. Warframes themselves can make gameplay changes in significant way. Each are geared towards a different aspect, with all of them having different abilities and playstyles. Some of the Warframes are pretty wild, and they aren't just cosmetic differences. There are completely off-the-rails powerful Warframes. If you're the type of player that likes to stockpile weapons and gear, Warframe limits the amount of items you can have in your inventory unless you buy additional slots with real cash. You're limited to 4 weapons and a couple of Warframes at the start. You can get by with that, but it helps to have an expanded inventory. So how do you customize and enhance all your weapons and Warframes? You do so with mods. These are like cards that you slot into your gear to enhance them in certain ways. Learning to mod your Warframe, your weapons, and your companions is a key aspect to this game. You're going to be shocked how a weapon's effectiveness can change with just a few mods. There are some mods that add fire or ice or other elemental effects and a bunch of other statuses. Not only damaging enemies that are weak to them, but they add significant amount of damage to your weapon. The mods need a tutorial all to themselves because this is a major part of Warframe.
I can't do you a weapon if you don't have weapon parts. Get the weapon parts, and I can make you a weapon. Okay, Roger, Roger?
There will come a point when you hit a wall in your missions. You're just not going to be doing the amount of damage that you need to, or you're going to be dying far too often. If that happens, it means one of two things. The first and most common is that you modded your weapon and your Warframe incorrectly. As you use a weapon, you gain mastery of it. Weapons typically go up to level 30. As you get better with them, you can use more mods on it. Think of weapons as having points. When you first get your weapon, it only has a few points, but as it levels up, it gets more points. Each mod takes a certain amount of points to equip. You want to give your gun shock, that'll be 6 points for a basic 15% shock damage. But you can also level those mods up by spending Endo, which is a currency you collect on missions. You can bump that shock percentage maybe up to 120% if you have enough Endo. Just know that the shock card is now going to need 12 points to be equipped instead of that 6. When you first get a weapon, it might only have 4 points on it. By the time it gets to level 30, it could have 40 or more points depending on the weapon. To add another quirk into the game is your mastery rank. It's sort of like your account level. It limits you on what missions you can do or your rank in game, so you want to bump it up when you can. Mastery ranks are obtained by completing missions, opening the star map up, and leveling up your weapons. Mastery ranks require certain missions to go up, and you can only do one mastery rank mission a day. So, back to mods. The level of the weapon means how many points it has for mods, and mods are key to clearing missions since it helps boost damage and your Warframe's health, armor, shields, etc. So you would think you'd want to use all your max weapons all the time, correct? No, that's wrong. Gaining levels on weapons gives you mastery ranks, so you kind of want to always be leveling a weapon. Sure, I mean, it's nice to have a max rifle for those mods, but that means you're missing out on mastery levels and holding yourself back in the long run. What you kind of want to do is switch out weapons when you master them, so you're always leveling something. Maybe keep the max weapons in case you hit a hard mission, but try to have a loadout that can be leveled. Now remember that wall I said most players hit at some point? The first reason you keep dying is that your Warframe and weapon mods are wrong, or you're using the wrong mods. Maybe you're using fire damage when the mission calls for shock damage, that sort of thing. The second reason you could be failing is that your weapons in Warframe suck. Warframe isn't pay to win, but it's not exactly a pick up any weapon and succeed kind of game. Your starting weapons stink. They're underpowered, they're inaccurate, they're not as good as later game weapons. You need to gather materials and blueprints and build better ones, or fork out some cash in the shop. Nearly every player in Warframe hits that wall. It's a part of the game. You can get by with trash weapons and improper setups for that first chunk of the game, but after that, it comes down to gearing your character correctly. It's an interesting part of the game, with not only skill and combat determining if you win, or your grinded levels like in an RPG, but your preparation beforehand. Proper loadouts are key in Warframe's later sections, and especially so in its endgame. Finally, I'm just going to zip through a few other gameplay features that Warframe has. There is your ship that you can decorate and is your base throughout the game. It's where you select missions, upgrade your items, and all that stuff you would expect. There are communal areas on every world, like open markets where players gather for missions, grinding reputation for unique items with the game's factions. It's pretty cool to see dozens of people in these areas, and you may want to walk through them slowly to check out everyone's gear. There are factions you can join or pledge to with all of those perks. Just be aware that some factions are friendly and some are bad to each other. I didn't get too deep into factions, but I know they offer unique items. Then there are player-led clans, and they run the gamut from small outfits of 1 to 2 players, up to big ones of hundreds if not thousands of players. Each have their own requirements for recruiting players, and you can sort through them by size and player type. Maybe you want a hardcore clan that focuses on a certain aspect of the game, you can do that. Or maybe you want a chill clan that is beginner-friendly and pretty lax. Those are available as well. There is so much in Warframe that it's difficult to condense it into a short video. I could talk for hours about all the different aspects of it. There's its World of Warcraft-esque parts, its Destiny parts, its Warhammer 40k parts. It has a bunch of different stuff from different genres, and you can literally spend thousands of hours playing and still not see it all.
Crucial surveillance data from nearby satellites. Protect them until I complete my task. This is it. Defend the satellite while I extract what we need.
A major part of Warframe is the missions. These are generally match-made, and meaning you can complete them solo or in groups of 4. Matchmaking is automatic, and it tells you on the select screen how many groups are currently doing a mission. I would say that personally, I had roughly half of my missions be completed with others. They don't take long to complete, depending on how motivated you are. They generally have a quest goal, like find something or kill somebody, and you can basically run through these types of missions really quickly to complete. When you select a mission from the star chart, it's going to tell you what type of mission it is. Although there isn't a legend to explain what they are, you kind of find out as you play. I found that a lot of the mission types aren't really fun. Things like sabotage, spy, capture, these usually involve going to a spot, collecting something, and then leaving again. Most people I play with on these missions run through them as fast as possible, and I couldn't blame them. Some of these levels are absolutely massive, and they recycled a lot of them. They generally look very similar, so it can be hard to figure out how exactly you're supposed to reach these objectives, even with a quest mark. The best missions by far are the defense and survival missions. Defense has you holding an area against waves of enemies while they try to destroy the object you're protecting. It means you can just hang out in a certain spot and kill stuff. Survival has you fighting an endless horde of enemies that keep respawning while the oxygen levels deplete, and you need to pick up items to restore that oxygen level or use marked containers to replenish it. Both these mission types are dumb fun, and I love them. FYI, if you're looking to level your weapons or Warframe, survival is the way to go. Just keep killing and making sure you swap weapons all the time. You'll be max in no time if you're on the higher difficulty worlds.
Okay, deploying armory.
Moving on from the gameplay, let's talk about the graphics and technicals of Warframe. It looks great on console, everything is very detailed, and the FPS was steady. I never had any slowdowns or crashes, there are also very few bugs, and the multiplayer was overall pretty stable. I barely got kicked out of games. The developers updated the older content from release with new cinematics, so everything looks new and good. The environments, on the other hand, can look very samey. The open areas and cities look great, but any of the missions you run use the same handful of environments repeatedly. So for every open plains of Eidolon or Phobos, you have a dozen corridors that look exactly the same as all the others. I already spoke of the microtransactions a bit already, but I'm going to expand upon it here. Warframe is a free-to-play game that is easily worth the purchase price of a modern AAA game. I don't mind that it has microtransactions because I would have paid $70 for what's offered here. They're never throwing them in your face throughout the game, but you are aware that it's always in the background, waiting for you if you want a little extra boost. Like I said, the microtransactions on offer here are more time savers than they are pay to win. Sure, some of the Warframes and weapons you can buy are clearly better than the ones you start with, but that's most games. The fact is, you can earn everything here if you spend the time and effort to get it. It's just going to take a lot of your time, and maybe that's fine for you. It's not like I was in a rush to reach the end game, so I was fine with taking a day to craft a weapon. There is literally thousands of hours of content here, even if you throw money at the game to get a boost. It's up to you how much you want to spend. To make it even better, you can trade with other players in-game. There's even an entire marketplace online using a third-party site to find people looking to trade. If you want some currency, you can offload some items instead of using your credit card. It just depends on how much you're wanting to spend grinding versus the reward you get.
Cold, the air and water flowing hard, the land we call our home. Push to keep the dark from coming, feel the weight of what we owe.
So now let's do the pros and cons of playing Warframe as a new player. For the pros, there's a lot of content here. You're looking at over a decade worth of releases, and it's all available to you right at the start. The game looks and plays great. There is a large, active community, and you're going to have no problem finding partners to play with. There's a ton of customization, including weapons, mods, and warframes. There is a lot of different places to explore and things to do. For the cons, it can be pretty difficult to learn what to do and how to gear your character as a new player. The first chunk of the game can be repetitive and boring. A lot of the lore and how to play the game is located on a wiki outside of the game. There is a lot of grinding. It can be said that the main point of Warframe is the grind. And that's it. We've come to the conclusion and the end of another review. I enjoyed playing Warframe, but I was definitely getting tired toward the end of my time with it. As a new player, it can be hard to get into. It's like a commitment to time that a lot of people don't have. But if you're looking for a fun shooter, check it out. It's free and can be a great way to unwind at the end of a hard day. Turn on a podcast or Netflix and zone out. I'm the Casual Console Gamer on YouTube. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe. It really helps my channel grow. I'll see you all in the next review.